Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the King Jordan Radio Show live. This is our debut show of 2018. It is Season 6, Episode 7. Tonight on the show, we'll talk about the California House of Horror, what a tragedy that is, and also the Larry Nassar case where he was convicted, and he's going to spend 175 years, basically his life. We'll talk about that. Prosecutors in the Bill Cosby case are looking to introduce 19 other women to show a pattern in Mr. Cosby's behavior to establish a pattern. We'll get our legal experts guess if that would be the right call or not. Plus, was Aziz's arrest really a rapist? We have commentary from Ashley Banfield. We'll talk about that, of course. Also, let's bring in our guests. First of all, we have two guests that are joining us. First of all, he was the lead defense attorney in the Jodi Arias trial that everybody watched in the last couple of years, and he's welcome back to the show. Ladies and gentlemen, Kirk Nurmi joins us. Hello, Kirk. How are you?
Good, Jordan. It's a pleasure to be back, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. Also, we have straight out of the courtroom. He's a Bronx attorney, seen on Ashley Banfield, seen on Nancy Grace, seen on a lot of shows. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome back Alex Sanchez to the program. Good evening, Alex. How are you?
Hello, Jordan. How are you? And it's great to be back, and I look forward to discussing legal issues with you and Kurt, and I think we're going to have a great time tonight.
Absolutely. So let's start with this guy. This guy who did a lot of damage to young girls. Here is a clip courtesy of NBC, and let's take a listen, and then we'll talk on the other side.
I've been following what's going on with USA Gymnastics and that horrible trial where these women have to give statements in the court about the sexual abuse that they endured at the hands of the former USA Gymnastics and Michigan State University Dr. Larry Nassar. And we're upwards of 150 of these girls, and now women, who had their day in court, and to be able to say what happened. Now we're going into the fourth day and probably going to get a sentencing coming up next week. But I think really it goes back to Jerry Sandusky with Penn State. Who knew? He was being investigated for 12 years. Who's protecting him? How's he allowed on campus? Who knew this? Were there complaints? Who heard the complaints? Were they formal complaints? How does this happen? And it's not just it happened for a year. It happened for decades at Penn State. And then you have the victims. And having known a victim who was involved in something like this, and no one listened to him. He was crazy. How could you say that about this person? This person was held in high regard. And you're saying this, are you making this up? Do you have a problem with this person? So then you suppress it, and then you have suicidal thoughts, like, I don't want to live. He drank a lot. He went into rehab eventually. And he eventually had his day, but at a heavy price, because it's with him the rest of his life. And you can tell he's empty at times. He's a shell at times, because it just never leaves, and it comes and goes where you think of something or something reminds you. He said at a certain type of cologne would just set him off because it would remind him of this person who sexually abused him. And these women, these brave women who have gotten in front of this judge, and I don't even know how to describe Larry Nassar. But this is how delusional this guy is. Larry Nassar admitted to decades of sexual abuse of girls, young women, often under the guise of medical treatment. He actually wrote a letter to the judge in charge of his sentencing, and he said that he's concerned about his ability to be able to face the witnesses over the next 4 days mentally. He's worried about his mental state listening to all these girls come forward and accuse him of what he did. I don't know what you can give him. I would give him a year for every girl that he abused, and that's still not enough. But I want to know who else was an enabler here. One guy pulled this off. One guy was guilty of this, and nobody knew. Who covered it up? I mean, that's what I want to know. If I give him 150 years in prison, and I say, look, I'm going to lop off 50 years here, I need to know who was helping you here. Like, I don't know if there's any incentive for him to talk, but I need to know. I need answers. Phone records, emails, what the hell? And he, this doctor, who wasn't even licensed to practice in the state of Texas, was, checking out these girls at Bella Caroli's ranch. Did Bella understand? Did anybody understand what the hell was going on? And if so, I want you brought up on charges. I think USA Gymnastics has just cut ties with Bella Caroli's ranch, from what I just read here. But I'm putting the hammer down here. I got to find out everybody who's involved in this. Michigan State, USA Gymnastics, and the fact that he would bring these girls in, 13, 14, 15 years of age, and, you're trusting the doctor. So when he says, this is how I'm going to examine you, and then you had these women who maybe didn't know better, or you had women who told their parents and their parents didn't believe them. But, man, this is just tough. You just feel for these women. It'll never leave. You get your 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes to be able to say what you want to say to this guy. But it'll never leave you. And these women know this. It'll never leave them. And it could be something as simple as what somebody says, how somebody touches them, how he smells. Did he wear cologne? Like, just weird things like this. And it's just horrible to read this. And this guy has the audacity to say, I'm worried about my mental status here, where I have to listen to all these women talk about how I abused them. But it looks like the sentencing is going to take place next week. But these girls were speaking out about his abuse, saying that they were powerless, that he pretended to be their friend. He wants forgiveness. I mean, he's the face of evil here. But I hope that we find out who the enablers were. Just like what happened with Jerry Sandusky. People went to prison. There are other people involved in this. And I hope the people who are going after this doctor are going after these other people. Because this isn't just sports related. These are criminal charges that need to be brought up and bring people in. So, but I've been, and I think it's what set me off with Jerry Sandusky is to have a friend who goes through this and to understand what those little boys, and now they've grown up into grown men, and they stay with it. It stays with you, and you take away the innocence there. You never get that innocence back. These bastards, man. God. So hopefully somebody is going after some other people, because it's not just Larry Nassar, and he'll rot in hell. Put him away as long as you want, but man, there's other people that need to be brought in.
For more Dan Patrick Show, tune to.
Okay, let me go with you, Kirk Nurmi, first. What's your take on the Larry Nassar situation?
Well, it's flat out disgusting, and adding to what Dan Patrick said, it is interesting what if this is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, how big of a net did this cast? My guess is I think we're about at 160 victims. Were there more?
Right.
There may be some more out there that still are afraid to come forward. There may be people that know or were told that failed to protect these children, mandatory reporter laws, things of that nature. So I think he's dead on. I think it could be the tip of the iceberg, and it's certainly a disgusting display of hypocrisy for someone who is supposed to be caring for these young girls.
Alex Sanchez, what's your takeaway from this?
Well, to me, it's remarkable that this situation could have gone on for as long as it did, with the number of victims before it came out in the public. I mean, I don't know who would want to cover for this guy.
Right.
Why would somebody want to cover? Unless you're a co-conspirator and you're gaining some, sexual gratification out of this, why would anybody want to cover for him? I mean, this guy's not. I mean, he's a doctor, okay, but I mean, he's not like, somebody that is not irreplaceable or something. I mean, I don't get it. So how could this have gone on to the degree that it did? It is kind of strange to me that these girls, I mean, I would imagine that they would have some type of a female mentor that they could have reported to other than their parents. There must have been somebody out there that they could have spoken to about issues, and it's hard to believe that somebody could not have connected the dots a lot earlier.
And it's possible that once it got too deep, the administration didn't want it to get out, Alex, and be brought up on charges.
Yeah, I mean, once things get too deep, then the whole cover-up situation starts to get in there, because then the Olympic Committee or wherever it is, or Caroli or whoever's mixed up with this, they become very protective of their organization that they have. And they know that if this comes out, this could destroy them all. But let's say they're aware of it. Why keep Nassar then? Why not just get rid of him? So I'm probably of the belief system that this guy was very clever, and he kept things very quiet, and nobody suspected him of doing anything wrong. Because I can't imagine if somebody did suspect him of doing something wrong, why not just bump him? This guy's not like, a one-of-a-kind individual in the world where, the whole universe is going to collapse if he's gone. I don't get it.
No, it doesn't make, after all these years, it doesn't make any sense. But the administrator did resign today. How convenient. And these crimes, the people that are covering it up should just be just as culpable. And how much time can a person covering up the situation, or how much time do you think they should get, Alex?
The covering up, I mean, what does covering up mean? What does that mean? That you're obstructing justice? You are aware of what's going on. You're aware of what's going on, and you're intentionally, guiding police away from any type of investigation. The most likely scenario is if there were some people that did not reveal whatever it is they knew, they probably felt that they would be brought up on some type of charges or civil charges, or they would lose their licenses. But I think it would be very hard to try to establish any culpability for those people that allegedly covered up, unless you have substantial evidence and proof that you can bring into a court of law to show that these people were, seriously involved in a conspiracy to block the police from learning what was going on. And that's not likely. That's not likely what happened here. I think this maniac, Nassar, was very clever and sick and diabolical, and he covered up his actions very, 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 very accurately.
And I believe he was married there with his wife.
And, that's the whole thing, man. The most diabolical criminals out there don't look like diabolical criminals. They look like ordinary people. They look like respectable people. They look like good church-going people, or people that are very religious, or they go into their synagogues, their mosques, and they do all the right things, and they have the right friends, and they say the right things, and their demeanor, does not indicate a monster. But behind that, is a terrible illness and sickness, and they engage in these monstrous activities, and that's why they're so hard to catch sometimes. And he's proof of that.
Yes, and
no,
the judge.
I was going to say if I could add to that, Jordan, what Alex was saying, as someone who's handled a lot of cases of this nature, not to this extent, of course, few things are to this extent, but Alex is dead on right, especially in the, it's particularly acute, I guess, what he was saying is in the sex offender world, because they have a tendency to blend in, to look normal, to know how to operate in polite society. And there was also the advantage he had in terms of disguising his operation was being a doctor, and that would invoke a modicum of privacy. So there may more than likely not have been someone in the room. If there was, maybe they would have turned a blind eye, and maybe they could be liable for not reporting if they had that status. But they can be very cunning and getting away with it, and knowing how to pick the people that won't come forward, knowing how to pick the right victim, and that's how it drags on for so many years, because the person, the people they choose to victimize are less likely to report.
And by the way,
Absolutely.
The perfect person, the ideal person that I could think of that represents the concept of someone that appears to be a normal person but is, a madman is, well, Jodi Arias herself. I mean, when you look at Jodi Arias, she was very pretty. She was articulate. She had an incredible command of the English language and the way she expressed herself. But behind it all, if you believe that she was guilty, and the evidence seemed to suggest that she was a monster. And she's not the only one like that. There's a lot of people like that. And that's what's so frightening.
No question about it. And we have another terrible case out in California. Let's take a listen to these details, and we'll talk.
Don't miss our special report tonight on 2020 as those closest to the House of Horrors in Southern California share what they know, and what they know will stun you. Exclusively today, our Robin Nance spoke with 2020 reporter Matt Gutman about covering the story there.
Details have shocked and disgusted the country. Parents David and Louise Turpin accused of holding their 13 children hostage, starving and torturing them for years. ABC's Matt Gutman has been on this story right from the start and is uncovering much more in a special 2020 tonight, right here on KXLY 4 News. And Matt, tell us about the initial reaction you had to the story coming in.
Shock. I saw it on one of those alerts on the phone, and immediately I knew that this was unusual. But the more we have delved into this story, and we've sent teams for 2020 across the country, West Virginia, Ohio, Texas, California, the more we learn about the alleged depravity of this family. I sat down with the DA last night, and he told me that for infractions as small as washing their hands above the wrist, the kids would be chained to their beds for weeks, sometimes months, never allowed to leave, even to use the bathroom. That the kids were subjected to systematic starvation, sometimes for decades, the eldest ones. That they were taunted. The family had money. David Turpin, who faces 38 counts, was an engineer. He was making $140,000 a year until a few years ago, and they would buy pies, pumpkin pie, apple pie, leave it on the counter, let the kids smell it, but never eat it. There were toys that were given to them or that they purchased that are still wrapped. They never allowed the kids to play with them. They never allowed the kids outside during the day. They would march them from room to room for hours at a time. The more we learn about this, the more horrible it seems, and that is why prosecutors here are so determined to see them to get the maximum punishment for David and Louise Turpin, who, if convicted, could spend the rest of their lives in prison. Robin. There are so many questions, and some of the big ones are, how did no one know? And some of this, we understand, is they've homeschooled their children, and it really calls into question the oversight. What is a state's responsibility to even just check up on the kids? You know, this is such a good question. So what you're looking at behind me was registered as the Sandcastle Day School. Now, nothing was being taught at the school, according to the DA. The kids are basically illiterate. They were just forced to sit around all day. And the state of California says it does not monitor private schools. It does not inspect them. It doesn't go in there. So nobody had any idea. And because they never allowed the kids out during the day, and because they basically cut off contact from the entire world, even their family members over the past 6 years, people saw snippets of what was going on. They were rolling out sod here in the middle of the night. They were forced to march. People saw them in the windows marching back and forth. But nobody apparently had any idea of the totality of the depravity that was happening in that house behind me that prosecutors allege happened for all of those years.
And here's what's, I think, also another interesting piece is that the children were not given the toys, but they had journals. Okay, if they were illiterate, as many people believe that they probably were, what were they writing in those journals? And would they be honest? Because I think prosecutors are all excited that these could be some smoking gun type of entries. But if the parents were so controlling, why would the kids write anything that could get them in trouble?
So the journals seem to be this giant wormhole in the universe of isolation that this family created around themselves. It's baffling. We have no explanation. The DA has no explanation. And you talk about the education of the kids. Some of them had a third-grade education, so they were able to write and draw pictures, but there were hundreds of volumes, and apparently there is some evidence in that, and prosecutors hope to use it against those parents, and they hope to get them the maximum sentence, which is life in prison.
All right, Matt, intriguing story. We will be watching very closely tonight on 2020.
And once again, that's tonight at 10 o'clock only on KXLY4.
Okay, Alex Sanchez, let me start with you. What's your takeaway, and how do you think they got away with this so long, this House of Horrors in California?
I mean, it's another remarkable story. It's incredible to me how two people, I mean, you could always have one person that's a madman, but to have two people together that are both engaged in this long-term conspiracy, I mean, this is really remarkable. These people, I don't care whether or not there's journals or there's no journals. I don't care if the kids don't even, for whatever reason, are not going to testify. These people are never going to see the light of day, because all you have to do is prove that they were under the custody and control of the mother and the father, and the kids were starving or they were not getting proper medical care. They could be convicted of, hundreds of counts of abuse and neglect and everything else. So they, prosecutors desperately trying to, accumulate all this other evidence about journals. I mean, that's good, but the reality is that they have basically a lock of a case right now, and everything else would just be gravy at this point. Do
you think, Alex, that the mother could work with the prosecution to say that maybe she was under his spell, afraid, and any defense lawyer would probably want to, say, let me approach the prosecutor, but that's pretty weak. I mean, it's one thing to be under the control of somebody for some temporary period of time. When you start getting into the decades situation, then it loses a lot of its credibility at that point. And this guy was out of the house, and he was working as an engineer, and this mother had a lot of free time. And what about the shopping and the displaying of the pies just to torture these kids and beating them? They're going away. They're not going to see the light of day, and that's all there is to it. And I feel sorry for these kids. I hope somehow they're able to recover. It's a remarkable case, but it's just more evidence of madness. And we may never fully understand exactly why these people did what they did. Absolutely. Kirk, what's your takeaway from this story?
Well, I definitely agree with Alex. They're not going to see the light of day. And my hope is, in terms of the, abuse that they perpetrated, that they don't further that abuse by forcing these kids to testify at trial. My assumption would be, it wouldn't shock me for these people to, in essence, dare their children to testify against them, and hope that because when somebody's going to prison for life, they don't necessarily feel like they have anything to lose. And if they feel like their kids won't speak up, they think, well, maybe they have a chance, or maybe they'll look less like a monster. Mental illness is obviously a big factor here, and I don't think any of that, though, and agreeing with Alex again, I don't think any of that would be enough to get either one of them to a point where seeing the light of day is a possibility. But why they did this, what their means are, if it was just to torture their kids, I believe that they will continue to do so in any way they can.
And you remember, Alex, there was a similar story called The Wolf Pack here in New York about 4 or 5 years ago, highlighted on 2020 this past week. You remember that one?
I don't remember that one. If you refresh my recollection, though. But this is not the first time we hear some crazy situation of some couple that is controlling their family in some bizarre, complete antisocial manner. I've heard of stories like this before, and certainly, I've represented people that have committed all kinds of abuse against their own kids. This, though, with 14 kids, and for the amount of time that this went on for, that's what makes this so extraordinary. But in terms of the case itself, the parents might be thinking, my kids are never going to tell. You don't need the kids. You don't need them to testify. Police have all the evidence they need. You just need to show the kids were neglected. You need to show that they were abused, the chains in the house. There's no way these people have any chance of winning this case.
And, Alex, why don't you tell our audience what happens to a guy like this that has been accused of doing this to children?
Oh, yeah, criminals, even the worst criminals that I've represented, they don't like people that abuse kids. They don't like people that commit these type of offenses. The most likely scenario is that these people are going to be in some type of protective custody, but protective custody is like being in solitary confinement. 23 hours a day, and they're walked out into like a yard or something like that to, just play basketball by themselves or stretch or something. But they're going to be living a very solitary, isolated existence for the next 45 years until they are dead. So if people get any solace out of that, well, that's what's going to happen,
Absolutely. Anything else on this, Kirk, to you?
No, I mean, I agree, and if it was misunderstood, I'm not thinking that they have any chance to see the light of day or win this case, but I do think they will take every opportunity they can to needle their kids further.
We can only hope so. Okay, the prosecutors in the Bill Cosby case want to introduce 19 other alleged rape from Bill Cosby. Here is the backstory to that. We'll talk about this on the other side. 19
Bill Cosby accusers could be allowed to testify in the comedian's retrial on sexual abuse charges this spring. Prosecutors preparing the case made that request today. They've asked for permission to have 13 accusers testify in Bill Cosby's first trial, which ended in a hung jury in June. But the judge only allowed testimony from one accuser, in addition to Andrea Constand. Cosby's retrial is now set for April 2nd.
All right, Alex, let me start with you. Should the judge allow this to show a pattern that Mr. Cosby does this to other women? If so, yes. And if so, why not no?
Well, remember, the prosecution previously made this application, the exact same application the prosecutor previously made in the first trial, right?
That's right.
And now the prosecutors, and it was denied by the judge, except for one witness. So now the prosecutor's essentially making the same application. So why should the judge change his opinion? Now, judges do change their opinion. Sometimes they say, wait a minute, I misinterpreted the law the first time, or there's some new case law that says I could do this. But if a judge is going to change his opinion, he has to explain on the record why he's going to allow those women to come in and testify. I think the judge was probably wrong the first time around. I think those women should have been allowed to testify for the very argument the prosecution made, that it did establish a pattern. Why not? And this guy was engaged in this persistent type of activity and criminal behavior. He had a whole program going of handing out dope and, getting people drunk and allegedly raping them when they were unconscious. Why shouldn't that come out? I don't understand. The only reason why I could think that the judge did not let it come out was because they were so old and Cosby couldn't be criminally prosecuted on those cases. So if he couldn't be...
Can't you make the argument, though, that this could be prejudicial to the defendant? Because, look, he's only charged with one person, Andrea Constant, and that could clutter up the jury. What about that argument? Anytime the prosecution wants to introduce evidence against the defendant, it's going to be prejudicial. The very purpose of introducing evidence is to prejudice the defendant. That's the very purpose of it. The question is it so prejudicial that it would interfere with the jury's ability to render a fair and impartial verdict? And perhaps that's the reason why the judge kept it out the first time. So I think the judge made a mistake by not letting it in the first trial. But if he's going to let it in now, he better have some very significant justification for changing his opinion that he rendered the first time. Absolutely, and you remember the second trial of the Menendez brothers. A lot of things were changed, not in favor of the defendants in that second trial. Nurmi, what's your take on this matter? Should all these women be allowed to? If so, yes, why? And if no, why?
Well, I think there's probably several reasons no. And the most prominent being is that this is the rule of the case now. This is the law of the case. The decision was made. Unless the judge can point to a specific fact that came up, to my thinking, in the first trial, say the prosecutor says, well, look at this testimony. Look how it correlates and maps in with some of these others. Something that wasn't known before at the time the judge made the decision would have to be the reason. The other concern becomes, is any conviction, like when you question, Alex, is any conviction that comes out of this going to be a product of the evidence related to that particular case, or is it going to be related to past behaviors that may be remote in time, might be different, that sort of thing? So that's a key component of having a fair trial, is you are being tried for the specific charges that have been rendered against you, not your lifetime pattern, if you were. Now, there's exceptions to that, and we could probably argue for the next hour whether or not those exceptions should apply. But because the judge said it didn't the first time, and because of the danger of unfair prejudice, which is, I'm assuming, the basis of the judge's original decision to limit it to one external victim, I think he or she, whoever's making this decision now, should uphold to the law of the case and not change the ballgame.
Absolutely. There's a lot of truth to that. Okay, Ashley Banfield spoke out for defending Mazi, I can't pronounce his name, the accuser, in an open letter. She is saying that this is not a part of the Me Too movement. Here is some sound of what she said, and we'll discuss if she makes any sense or not on the other side.
Well, I'd like to say something here, and maybe this is best done in the form of an open letter to Aziz Ansari's accuser. Ready? Dear Grace, not your real name. I'm sorry that you had a bad date. I have had a few myself. They stink. I am sure it must be really weighing on you. It's hard being a victim. Very painful. Just ask anyone who's been on that end of crime and justice. I cover them every day. It's no picnic. But let's take a moment to reflect on what you claim was the worst night of your life, end quote. You had a bad date. Your date got overly amorous. After protesting his moves, you did not get up and leave right away. You continued to engage in the sexual encounter. By your own clear description, this was not a rape, nor was it a sexual assault. by your description, your sexual encounter was unpleasant. It did not send you to the police. It did not affect your workplace or your ability to get a job. So I have to ask you, what exactly was your beef? That you had a bad date with Aziz Ansari. Is that what victimized you to the point of seeking a public conviction and a career-ending sentence against him? Is that truly what you thought he deserved for your night out? Let me be completely clear. If you were sexually assaulted, you should go to the police right now. If you were sexually harassed and your bad date because of his actions mitigated your ability to do your job, you should definitely speak up and loud. Because that's happened to me too, and it stinks. But if you just had an unpleasant sexual experience, you should have gone home. Maybe just go ahead, tell your friends to avoid this guy, he's gross. Go ahead, tell the date himself he's gross, that he is not the lover that he thinks he is. And without question, don't go on a second date with him. Certainly do not marry a guy like that. But what you have done, in my opinion, is appalling. You went to the press with the story of a bad date, and you have potentially destroyed this man's career over it right after he received an award for which he was worthy. And now here is where I am going to claim victim. You have chiseled away at a movement that I, along with all of my sisters in the workplace, have been dreaming of for decades. A movement that has finally changed an oversexed professional environment that I, too, have struggled through at times over the last 30 years in broadcasting. If you're lucky, there's a really good chance that you're not going to experience the toxic work environment that the rest of us have endured, and that is because of the remarkable progress being made against the Harvey Weinsteins and the Kevin Spaceys of the world. The Me Too movement has righted a lot of wrongs, and it has made your career path much smoother. And here's where I'm guessing it's going to be a long career path. You're 23. What a gift. Yet you looked that gift horse in the mouth and chiseled away at that powerful movement with your public accusation. And I'm going to repeat this because it's important. If you were sexually assaulted, go to the cops. If you were sexually harassed, jeopardizing your work, speak up and speak out loud. But by your own descriptions, that is not what happened. You had an unpleasant date, and you did not leave. That is on you. And all the gains that have been achieved on your behalf and mine are now being compromised by the allegations that you threw out there. And I'm going to call them reckless and hollow. I cannot name you publicly and sentence you to a similar career hit as Ansari because you chose to remain anonymous. Lucky you. But as you grow in your photography career, I really do hope that you remember what you did to someone else's career, all because of that bad date that was not a sexual assault, that was not sexual harassment by your description. And I hope the next time you go on a bad date, you stand up sooner, you smooth out your dress, and you bloody well leave. Because the only sentence that a guy like that deserves is a bad case of blue balls, not a Hollywood blackball.
Goodness, Ashley Banfield. Let me go to Alex Sanchez first on this. Alex, what's your takeaway on this situation?
I basically agree with Ashley. You know, this woman goes out on a date, and
right.
You know, this guy's, you know, trying to, you know, have some fun. She wasn't objecting, but Ashley's statement right there, I mean, this sounds like overkill. I mean, she makes it sound like she's making a major address, you know, put it on the at some this is an issue of such major significance and importance. And
well,
she went on and on and on. A little bit too preachy. To me, the statement was a little bit. I agree with her, but a little bit.
Career suicide.
Yeah, but you know what? This person should have been ignored, to tell you the truth, because it's so preposterous what she is saying that anybody should have just not even paid attention to it, because all you have to do is read it and realize this is ridiculous. There's no allegation here, and you know the person making the allegation would have collapsed under her own weight. But to go on and use this as a cause celeb, I think that's a little bit. That's just overkill, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, Kirk, what's your takeaway on this story?
Well, I guess I kind of take the opposite of Alex in the sense that I don't think the horse Ashley was on could be high enough, because I believe an accusation, an allegation like this is not only harmful to the man whose career she's trying to ruin, but also harmful to every woman who makes a legitimate allegation. We're talking earlier about these women on the U.S. Olympic team and how maybe they didn't come forward because they might not be believed. Well, if we're going to have everybody come forward with things like this that are not sexual assault, that are not harassment, it is an insult and a slap into the face at every woman who is a victim of that. So, I say that Ashley is dead on. I always think that sex crimes are the easiest to be wrongfully accused of. And essentially that's what this woman was doing. And now we have headlines, for example, the article you sent me, is he a rapist? Hell no, he's not a rapist. I mean, we're talking about what she is saying is non-verbal cues. You didn't pick them on my cues. Well, this is not a paternalistic society. If women want equal rights, then they have to be able to say no, yes, what have you, and stand by that and not force the man to read mental cues. And that is an unfair proposition. It is unfair to the man, and it is unfair to the women that are being sexually abused. It's disgusting.
Totally agree with you.
The whole thing there is that, and I certainly agree with Kurt on this. He's absolutely right. But she didn't make any allegations, really. She said something, and she made made a suggestion that something dark had happened. But when you look at what she had written, she didn't make any type of substantial allegations against this guy. The thing was ridiculous. I blame the publisher who would publish this nonsense. Why is a publisher...
She also put herself in the, quote, Me Too hashtag, along with a lot of women that came forward. So she put herself in that situation.
Why would any legitimate paper, or even an illegitimate paper, publish something like that? It's ridiculous. Anyway.
Well, we've seen it time and time again. It's not credible. But this guy was, he just got a show on net. He's on Netflix, and he's done a lot. And we'll see if he gets work from this. He's blackballed, going forward. Okay, we have a caller. Let's go out to Mary. She says hello. Mary, you're live on the King Jordan Radio Show with Kurt and Alex.
Hi, Jordan. Good to see that you're doing well again. And
thank you.
Hi to Kurt and Alex. Good talking with you
Mary.
again.
Hi, Mary.
How are you?
I'm fine. The main thing that boggles my mind is the crime with the parents and this lack of oversight by the authorities in California. It seems like there should not be any school, private or public, but certainly not private anyway, that is not, you have to file an affidavit so they know you're applying. You name it or whatever. You name how many students are going to be, and you're the principal. Someone has to have some kind of overseeing that these things are really done properly, because even if it's not a sexual thing or they were being kept captive or whatever, how do you know that these children are receiving adequate education as well? So I just looked up in California, all you need to do is apply for an affidavit, get in touch with the satellite education program, and there off you go. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous, And,
well, Mary, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Well, and the other thing, I just want to make sure, I hear you guys are never going to see the light of day. I hope there is no plea deal whatsoever in this case where they have one pinned against the other. And I do know that they're not allowed to talk to the children. Yesterday they went on a hearing, and the judge ordered a no contact of any kind whatsoever of either parent with their children, but they can receive information through their attorney, and that's it. So,
well,
yeah, go ahead, Kirk.
Go ahead, Alex.
I was going to say that's called basically an order. That's called an order of protection. The kids have an order of protection, and the judge is basically telling the parents, I'm ordering you to stay away from them. Don't have any contact. That's what that is. And regarding the case with the parents and the oversight that you were talking about, you're absolutely right. I mean, how come no authorities, social service authorities, educational authorities, even police authorities, nobody became suspicious about what's going on, about the lack of medical treatment or vaccinations, or, nobody knew what was going on. It is remarkable in the extreme. And you're 100% right. People cannot be allowed to just go on and have this type of control without anybody looking over their shoulder, because that's when abuse takes place.
And it's very sad. Some of the girls that turned women some of them committed suicide. Go ahead, Kirk. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, Mary, just to kind of piggyback a little bit on what Alex is saying, against the order of protection, that tells me that, California probably doesn't have a victim's Bill of Rights like we do in Arizona, which would be a per se bar. But I'm assuming that the prosecutors requested that situation, or a guardian perhaps on some of the children's behalf did, because they're concerned that the parents are going to try to manipulate the kids, because there could be, Alex is right, there could be all this enough evidence of neglect to put them away for life. But now if the prosecutors in California are like the prosecutors in Arizona, they are required to investigate every instance of sexual abuse that they can, under the theory that if these people did it to their own children, they may have done it to others. Who knows what they were up to. So that's what I'm talking about, forcing the kids to testify, manipulating the kids. These parents are probably trying to mitigate their damage, because even though we can sit out here as rational human beings and say they're never getting out again, the person who is in that situation is not going to give up hope, and they are going to feel that there is some way that they can get out of it, and they're going to do whatever they can to do it. And they know they've had success at manipulating their kids for 20 plus years. So that is probably the reason for the protection. And certainly you're right regarding the charter school issue or homeschool issue rather, in California.
Thank you, guys, and have a nice evening. I'm in Hawaii, sunny Hawaii, and Kurt, I saw you on Jody Arias the other day, and that's sort
special.
Of really a bunch of memories. But anyway, you'll have a good evening.
I haven't watched it yet.
Was that on the ID network? That special?
It was.
was.
I think you had enough of that for one lifetime. Thanks, Mary, for the call. And thank you, Alex, for joining us here tonight. Thank you, Kirk. Pleasure.
It was a lot of fun. A lot of fun to be on with you. And, Kurt, it was great being on with you, too. Pleasure to meet you.
Alex, it was nice meeting you, and hopefully our paths will cross again.
I'm sure
they
will.
Yes, and, of course, just you want to tell them your website, Kirk, about your books, etc.?
Sure. They can go onto Nurmi Unchained. It's a lot of my work with lawyers. If there's any lawyers listening, I start doing life coaching for lawyers, the stress, that sort of thing that they're encountering in the legal profession that ultimately led to my health problems. I'm trying to do what I can through speaking and coaching and writing to help out.
Absolutely. And Alex, while you're here, for anybody listening, what is your website?
My website is alexandersanchez.com. Welcome to look it up and read about me, and if you need my services, give me a call.
Absolutely. Okay, we'll speak to you guys soon. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
All right,
Jordan.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye now.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that was the great Alex Sanchez and the great Kirk Nurmi, two wonderful guests that we had here, and a great way to bang up the new year. As a lot of you know, I was injured for a while. Don't want to get too much into that, but so we're going to try to do some shows regularly. Expecting a Richard Herman next time that we do a show, so we'll concentrate on that. A lot of interesting topics we discussed, from the comedian getting falsely accused, the prosecutors looking to show pattern in the Bill Cosby retrial, which my buddy Tom Mesereau, by the way, is the head lawyer now of that, but I still think that Mr. Cosby is guilty of something, despite me and Tom being friends. The case of the 12, I think it's 12, a lot of children locked up in that apartment is horrific. Just thinking about it makes me absolutely, unequivocally sick. And, of course, the cover-up and the crime with the doctor and over 100-plus kids. And we're talking 6 years old to 9 years old. Terrible, terrible story. It makes you just so sad. Well, we got a minute. Check out Joey Jackson Fans. Our friend Sharon runs that. Go over there and give it a like. Let me give you a shout-out to Vicky, Madeline, Lorraine, who I think just listened for the first time. Big shout-out to you. Mary, Sarah, and Vicky, and all the rest. So we had Neil Diamond in the news. Unfortunately, he is now suffering with Parkinson's disease, and that's so sad. But the reason I bring him up is because we're going to leave you with, I believe, one of his best songs of all time. So let's get to that. And, of course, thank you for everybody's support, listening to the program as I look for this thing here. So have a good night, and follow us on Facebook.com/King Jordan Radio, and on Twitter, King Jordan RAD. Have a good night, ladies and gentlemen. Here's Neil Diamond.